The chains around her wrists were heavy, but not as heavy as the weight of what was coming. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra stood in the dusty street, once a ruler of an empire that stretched from Egypt to Turkey. Now, Roman soldiers shoved her forward as crowds gathered to watch. The year was 274 AD, and Rome had just captured one of the most powerful women in the ancient world. Behind her, thousands of Roman citizens lined the streets, waiting for the triumph parade. In just hours, she would be paraded through Rome in golden chains, displayed like a trophy before being thrown into a cell to await her final judgment. Her crime: daring to challenge Rome's power. Her punishment: a fate that would echo through history as a warning to anyone who dared defy the empire. But Zenobia wasn't the first queen to face Rome's brutal justice. And she wouldn't be the last. What happened to captured queens reveals the darkest side of Roman power. A combination of public humiliation, political theater, and calculated cruelty designed to break not just bodies, but spirits. Before we reveal the shocking truth about what Rome did to captured queens, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. History this brutal needs to be remembered. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and let's dive into one of history's darkest chapters. To understand the fate of captured queens, you need to understand what Rome was. The Roman Empire at its height controlled nearly 2 million square miles of territory, from Britain to North Africa, from Spain to the Middle East. Between 27 BC and 476 AD, Rome dominated the ancient world through superior military tactics, brutal efficiency, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Roman military culture was built on a simple principle: victory must be total, and defeat must be visible. When Rome conquered a territory, they didn't just want submission, they wanted the entire world to see that submission. This is where the triumph parade came in, a ceremony that combined military celebration with public humiliation. A Roman triumph was the highest honor a general could receive. The victor would ride through Rome in a golden chariot, dressed in purple robes, with a slave whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." Behind him would march his legions, carrying the spoils of war. And at the very end, in chains, would come the captured enemy leaders, kings, queens, generals, forced to walk through jeering crowds before facing their final fate. For male captives, the outcome was usually straightforward: execution by strangulation in the Tullianum prison, a dark underground cell beneath the Roman Forum. Quick, brutal, efficient. But for queens and noblewomen, Rome had something different in mind, something designed to destroy not just their lives, but their legacy and dignity. The Romans believed in breaking the enemy's spirit publicly. An executed king became a martyr, but a humiliated queen became a lesson. She served as living proof that Rome could not be challenged, that even the most powerful women were ultimately powerless against Roman might. This calculated cruelty wasn't random violence, it was political theater on a massive scale. Several factors determined a captured queen's fate. First, how dangerous was she politically? Queens who commanded genuine loyalty from their people received harsher treatment. Rome wanted to destroy any lingering hope of resistance. Second, how much wealth could be extracted from her? Queens often knew where royal treasuries were hidden, and torture was used to extract this information. Third, how useful was she alive? Some queens were kept as hostages to control conquered territories or as bargaining chips in political negotiations. The process began the moment a queen was captured on the battlefield. Roman soldiers were trained to identify high-value prisoners. Special units would secure captured royalty, not out of respect, but because they represented enormous value, both in ransom and in propaganda. The journey to Rome could take months, during which the queen would be kept in chains, displayed in conquered cities along the route as proof of Roman victory. By the time a captured queen reached Rome, she'd already endured weeks or months of humiliation. But that was just the beginning. The real ordeal started when she entered the city itself, when hundreds of thousands of Roman citizens gathered to see their empire's latest trophy paraded through the streets like a captured animal. Let's walk through what actually happened to these women, starting with the most famous case, Cleopatra VII of Egypt. When Mark Antony and Cleopatra were defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Cleopatra knew exactly what awaited her if she was captured alive. She'd seen what Rome did to other queens. She'd heard the stories. That's why she chose suicide by snakebite, death by her own hand rather than face the alternative. But what was that alternative? What did Cleopatra know that made death preferable? The answer lies in what happened to other queens who didn't have that choice. Let's start with Vercingetorix's family. While Vercingetorix himself was a male Gallic leader, his wife and daughters were captured when he surrendered to Julius Caesar in 52 BC. Historical records suggest they were taken to Rome and either sold into slavery or kept as hostages. Their specific fate isn't recorded in detail, but the pattern is clear. Female relatives of defeated leaders disappeared into Roman control, their nobility stripped away, their names forgotten. Queen Tutor of Illyria faced a different fate in 228 BC. After waging naval war against Rome, she was captured and forced to sign a humiliating treaty. Rome didn't execute her, but they destroyed her power completely. She was allowed to rule a tiny fraction of her former kingdom, but only as a Roman puppet. Every decision had to be approved by Rome. She went from commanding fleets to being a figurehead with no real authority. Historical accounts suggest she eventually took her own life rather than continue living as Rome's puppet. Then there's Cartimandua, queen of the Brigantes in Britain. She wasn't technically captured. She was a Roman ally who divorced her husband to marry his armor-bearer. When her people rebelled against her Roman alliance around 69 AD, Rome sent troops to rescue her. But rescue was a relative term. She was taken to Rome, given a comfortable house, and essentially placed under elegant house arrest. She lived in luxury, but as a kept woman, a symbol of Roman generosity to loyal clients. She could never return home. She died in Rome, comfortable but powerless, her queenship reduced to a pension. But the most detailed account we have is of Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. In 272 AD, she controlled an empire that rivaled Rome itself. She'd conquered Egypt, controlled trade routes from Arabia to Turkey, and minted coins with her face on them, a direct challenge to Roman authority. When Emperor Aurelian finally defeated her forces in 274 AD, he was determined to make an example of her. Zenobia was transported to Rome in conditions designed to break her spirit. She traveled in a cage, displayed in every city along the route. Local populations were encouraged to come out and see the barbarian queen who dared challenge Rome. By the time she reached Rome itself, she'd spent months being treated like a circus animal. The Triumph Parade for Aurelian was one of the most elaborate in Roman history. Zenobia was forced to walk the entire route through Rome, over 2 miles through crowded streets, wearing heavy golden chains. Historical accounts by the historian Zosimus described the chains as so heavy she needed slaves to help carry them. She was dressed in her royal regalia, her crown, her jewels, her finest clothes. But all of it turned into costume jewelry for Rome's entertainment. The crowds didn't just watch silently. They shouted insults, threw garbage, spat at her. Roman propaganda had painted her as an Eastern witch who'd used feminine wiles to seduce Roman territories away from the empire. The humiliation was total and public, broadcast to the entire Roman world through written accounts and artwork. After the parade, Zenobia faced interrogation. Roman officials wanted to know everything. Where was the royal treasury? Which Roman officials had secretly supported her? Who else might rebel? The interrogation methods were brutal. Roman torture techniques included the rack, burning, and psychological manipulation. We don't know exactly what Zenobia endured, but historical accounts mention she was questioned extensively about her supporters and resources. The fate of Zenobia's family was equally brutal. Her sons were executed, seen as too dangerous to be left alive. Her daughters disappeared into the Roman slave system or were married off to Roman citizens to dilute any royal bloodline. This was standard Roman practice: eliminate male heirs who might lead rebellions, and absorb female relatives into Roman society where they'd lose their identity entirely. Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe in Britain faced perhaps the most vicious treatment of all, though her story ended differently. In 60 AD, after her husband died, Roman soldiers invaded her home. They flogged Boudica publicly and violated her 2 daughters. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated humiliation designed to break the Iceni spirit. Instead, it sparked one of the largest rebellions in Roman Britain's history. Boudica led an army that destroyed 3 Roman cities and killed thousands of Romans before finally being defeated. Knowing what capture meant, she poisoned herself rather than face Roman justice. What would Roman justice have been for Boudica? Based on other cases, she would have been paraded through Rome, publicly interrogated about her rebellion, possibly tortured to reveal other potential rebels, and then either executed or imprisoned for life. Her daughters, if captured alive, would have faced sale into slavery or forced marriage to erase their royal heritage. The pattern becomes clear. Rome's treatment of captured queens served multiple purposes. It eliminated political threats by destroying royal bloodlines. It extracted valuable intelligence and treasure through interrogation. It provided public entertainment through triumph parades. And most importantly, it sent a message to anyone else considering rebellion. This is what happens when you challenge Rome. The cruelty wasn't just physical. It was psychological and cultural. Queens who once commanded armies and ruled kingdoms were reduced to spectacles, their power turned into entertainment, their dignity stripped away in the most public fashion possible. And they were kept alive through this ordeal specifically because death would have been too merciful, too quick. Rome wanted the world to see these women broken, to see that even the mightiest queens were ultimately powerless against Roman might. But here's where history gets interesting. Some queens refused to break, and their resistance, even in chains, sometimes changed the script Rome had written for them. Zenobia's story didn't end with humiliation and execution, as Rome had planned. Something unexpected happened during her imprisonment. According to historical accounts by the historian Augusta, Zenobia impressed her captors with her intelligence, her knowledge of multiple languages, and her understanding of philosophy and literature. She spoke Latin, Greek, Egyptian, and Aramaic fluently. She could discuss philosophy with Roman senators and quote Roman historians in their own language. Emperor Aurelian, who'd led the campaign against her, made an unusual decision. Instead of executing her, he granted her a villa in Tiber, modern-day Tivoli, about 20 miles from Rome. She was given a pension and allowed to live out her life in comfortable retirement. Her daughters were married into Roman aristocratic families. It wasn't freedom, and it wasn't a restoration of her power, but it was survival, something few captured monarchs achieved. Why did Aurelian spare her? The historical record suggests several factors. First, executing such a famous queen might have made her a martyr and inspired future rebellions. Second, keeping her alive as a pensioner demonstrated Roman mercy, showing that Rome could afford to be generous to defeated enemies who accepted their fate. Third, her obvious education and capability may have earned genuine respect from Roman elites who valued Greek and Roman culture. But don't mistake this for kindness. Zenobia lived the rest of her life under Roman supervision, never allowed to return to Palmyra, forbidden from any political activity. She went from ruling an empire to being a tourist attraction. Wealthy Romans would visit her villa to see the famous queen of the East who challenged Rome. She was a living museum piece, her survival itself a form of continuing humiliation. Other queens found different ways to resist or negotiate their fate. Cleopatra Selene, daughter of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony, was captured as a child and brought to Rome after her parents' deaths. She was raised in the household of Octavia, Mark Antony's Roman wife. When she came of age, Emperor Augustus arranged a marriage to King Juba II of Mauritania, making her a queen again, but a Roman client queen, ruling only at Rome's pleasure. Cleopatra Selene used this position cleverly. She promoted Egyptian culture in Mauritania, named her son Ptolemy after her grandfather, and minted coins showing herself wearing the crown of Egypt. She couldn't restore her mother's empire, but she kept Egyptian royal heritage alive through her children and her cultural influence. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, maintaining identity and heritage despite Roman domination. Queen Catamanjua of the Brigantes, mentioned earlier, also found a way to survive by becoming Rome's ally rather than its enemy. When her people turned against her for collaborating with Rome, she chose Roman protection over nationalistic pride. She lived comfortably in Rome until her death, maintaining her title and receiving a generous pension. To her people, she was a traitor. To Rome, she was a success story, proof that cooperation with Rome was better than resistance. The larger truth is that some queens learned to navigate Roman power structures by becoming what Rome wanted them to be, symbols of Roman superiority and mercy. They traded their sovereignty for survival, their power for comfort, their independence for security. It was a devil's bargain, but in a world where the alternative was death or slavery, some queens chose to live diminished rather than die proud. This created a strange historical legacy. Queens like Zenobia are remembered today partly because they survived to tell their stories, or at least to have their stories recorded by Romans who were impressed by them. Queens who were executed or disappeared into slavery left almost no historical record. We don't even know their names in many cases. So the queens we remember are often the ones who compromised, who survive by accepting Roman terms. Does this make them weak? Or does it make them pragmatic survivors in an impossible situation? History has debated this question for 2,000 years. What's clear is that these women faced choices no one should have to make, and their decisions, whether to fight to the death like Boudica or to survive in comfortable captivity like Zenobia, were all made under the shadow of Rome's overwhelming power. So what's the final truth about what happened to queens captured by Roman soldiers? The answer is complex and brutal. The fate of these queens reveals how empires maintain power, not just through military might, but through carefully calculated displays of dominance that combined violence with theater. Rome understood that the way you treat captured leaders sends a message to everyone watching. Execute them too quickly, and they become martyrs. Treat them with respect, and you appear weak. But break them publicly, humiliate them thoroughly, and then show mercy to the broken remnants? That demonstrates absolute power. For the queens themselves, capture meant the end of everything they'd known. Their kingdoms were absorbed into the Roman Empire. Their children were killed, enslaved, or assimilated into Roman society. Their wealth was confiscated. Their names were often erased from their own people's history, replaced by Roman propaganda versions that painted them as barbaric rebels who'd gotten what they deserved. The psychological torture was often worse than the physical. Imagine being Queen Zenobia, who'd commanded armies and made emperors negotiate with you, reduced to walking in chains through Rome while crowds jeered. The humiliation wasn't an accident or a side effect. It was the entire point. Rome wanted to break not just the queen, but the idea that anyone could challenge Roman power and maintain their dignity. Yet there's another lesson here about resilience. Some of these queens found ways to survive, to adapt, to preserve something of themselves even in captivity. Zenobia lived long enough to see her daughters married into Roman families, ensuring that her bloodline continued even if her empire didn't. Cleopatra Selene kept Egyptian culture alive in North Africa. Even Cartimandua, considered a traitor by her people, lived her final years in comfort rather than dying in battle. This raises uncomfortable questions about resistance and survival. Is it nobler to die fighting like Boudica, or to survive in captivity like Zenobia? Is it betrayal to cooperate with conquerors to save your life, or is it wisdom? These aren't easy questions, and different cultures throughout history have answered them differently. What's undeniable is the gender aspect of Rome's cruelty. Male captives were usually executed quickly. The deaths were efficient, almost respectful in their brevity. But female captives, especially queens, faced prolonged humiliation designed to attack their dignity, their sexuality, and their identity as women. Rome's treatment of captured queens combined misogyny with imperialism, using gender-specific humiliation as a weapon of war. The legacy of these queens echoes through history. When we remember Cleopatra choosing suicide over capture, we're remembering a woman who understood exactly what Rome would do to her. When we study Boudica's rebellion, we're learning about a woman driven to desperate resistance by Rome's brutal treatment of her and her daughters. When we read about Zenobia's golden chains, we're seeing the culmination of Rome's philosophy of victory, not just to defeat enemies, but to humiliate them so thoroughly that resistance seems pointless. These stories matter today because they reveal truths about power that haven't changed in 2,000 years. Empires still use humiliation as a weapon. Powerful people still face the choice between resistance and survival. The world still judges women leaders differently than male leaders, expecting them to be both strong enough to rule and graceful enough in defeat. The queens captured by Rome were real women who faced impossible choices in impossible situations. Some fought to the death. Some survived in captivity. Some cooperated with their captors. History judges them differently, but they all faced the same brutal reality. Rome's power was absolute, and challenging it came with consequences designed to break not just bodies, but spirits and legacies. The final truth is this: Rome didn't just want to defeat these queens. Rome wanted to erase them, to turn powerful women who'd ruled empires into cautionary tales about the futility of resistance. And in many cases, Rome succeeded. We know the names of a handful of captured queens, but dozens more have been lost to history, their names forgotten, their stories untold, their fates recorded only as footnotes in Roman triumph accounts. What do you think? Would you have chosen to fight to the death like Boudica, or survive in captivity like Zenobia? There's no easy answer. If this deep dive into history's brutal truth moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that history often tries to forget. Share your thoughts in the comments below. These queens deserve to be remembered, and your engagement keeps their stories alive. Thanks for watching, and remember, history isn't just about what happened, it's about what we choose to remember and learn from that asterisk. The Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, but the stories of the queens who challenged it lived on. Their courage, their suffering, and their survival remind us that even in humanity's darkest moments, there are always individuals who refuse to be completely broken. That's a lesson worth remembering.